getting ready for the incredible sound of classic rock? No? Good, because now it's time for Visiting the Village.
Hello and welcome to Visiting the Village. I'm Paul Kilduff-Taylor and with me is the impervious Ian Hardingham.
Hello Mr. Paul Kilduff-Taylor. I've been ported to a new engine this week, so you should notice improved load times and significantly reduced pop-in.
Let's get out of this dungeon.
It's the top story.
Microsoft have stopped accepting new sign-ups for Xbox Live indie games as part of a prolonged sunsetting process. 1 year from now, the marketplace will be shut down for good, and Microsoft will begin the process of archiving the games on there in order to, quote, preserve the legacy of XBlig. Microsoft hopes that developers will move to their ID at Xbox program. Do you have fond memories of XBlig?
I do. I'd like to say that I think we're all part of a long sunsetting process. That's certainly how I feel. I'm glad to be joined by XBlig in that. So I was never like a huge XBlig guy. I think I only actually downloaded one XBlig game and actually played it, which was Soulcaster, which was a very cool combination between an RPG and a tower defense game. You had three characters. I think it was like an archer, a magician, and a fighter or something, and you moved them around RPG with really nice pixel art RPG levels, and you had to make them into turrets to do something or other. I can't remember exactly what, but that was very good, and that's actually the sequel to that is actually the highest rated game of all time on XBlig. I actually googled a quick check on what generally people really like on XBlig, and a lot of stuff I hadn't heard of. One of the really apparently highly rated ones is something called Mount Your Friends.
Yes,
which actually looks a bit like Slave Tetris.
Oh my god.
I actually, looking at these lists, I have to say I quite like the look a lot of these games had. I don't know if it was about XNA, because to release on a game on XBlig you had to use Microsoft's XNA library, but something about the games looks quite attractive to me, and it seems like it's sort of more of a nice individual niche than some other things.
Right, there was definitely a kind of XBlig style. I was also trying to think back to ones I actually remembered, and one of them was I made a game with zombies in it, which was obviously spelt in a ludicrous way. It had loads of question marks and exclamation marks after the name. And that was the kind of XBlig indie darling. It was a really stupid game with a stupid name, and it made loads and loads of money on there. And that was the kind of... people started feeling like, oh, you know, you can just get XNA and you can just release anything, and it'll work. And it was very rarely true as ever, but specifically on there, I think it was kind of... they managed to keep that dream alive for a long time. I remember they were pushing it very heavily to students as kind of a good way of getting into games development, but like you say, it was kind of very restrictive. You had to use their stuff. You had to use C#, which at the time people didn't like. It's kind of got its own weird atmosphere to it. It's nice that they're preserving it, but I was frankly surprised to learn it was still going now.
Yeah, I think it actually has been a long sunsetting process, because they stopped updating XNA itself in 2013. Also, XBlig, of course, is only on the Xbox 360, so it's sort of naturally being put out to pasture by not being on the Xbox One. To move to some more negative aspects, there was the infamous update to the Xbox interface that hid XBlig behind a bunch of menus, and
yes.
They eventually rolled this back after a huge number of people complained. And actually, I think that the amount of advertising that Microsoft's always had on its front end has been pretty bad on the consoles, I have to say. And I think that update itself was a really bad sign of things to come. So that wasn't great, and it was also using XNA, I think that there was a route to release XNA games on the PC as well. I'm not sure if they started off allowing you to do that on Steam. I think they probably ended up doing that. You and I have probably talked about XBlig several times on older episodes of the podcast back in the far reaches of 2009 or something. And it's not something I feel like we ever would have recommended people to try and make a profit on. It was a bit too small an ecosystem, and really it was very, very rare for games to make a lot of money. But yeah, I have a hit of nostalgia, and I think there are some really nice little games on here, and I kind of really hope that they manage to package 100 together and release them on a DVD for Xbox One. That would be a really cool thing.
That would be really cool. Wow, yes, they should definitely do that. I would really like to see that kind of thing, because one of the saddest things in game development is when someone's work becomes impossible to play. And I think that they're sort of in danger of that. So yeah, properly preserving it would be good. I also think this kind of marked the start of their change in how they viewed indie developers. This was kind of their green light in a lot of ways before Greenlight existed. It was a way of getting on there if you had no hope of getting a publisher and no hope of kind of attracting their attention as a bigger game. And from what people have said, ID at Xbox seems to be largely very successful. It seems like they have a good developer outreach program now. And I think a lot of that is down to kind of them testing the water with XBlig and just kind of figuring out the stuff that people wanted to make.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft have traditionally had trouble with this, and I agree that what I'm hearing about ID at Xbox, their proper indie channel on Xbox One, is reasonably good. Yeah, I think that it's still just awesome to see your own game running on a console. Funnily enough, that hasn't actually got particularly easier. It's not like you can publish anything to an Xbox or a PS4 or a Wii U nowadays. So I think there was always that dream that you could download the SDK, spend a bit of time fiddling around and see it running on an Xbox on your TV, which I think was probably an absolutely awesome feeling.
Yeah.
I feel like people now understand. You mentioned Greenlight. I think platform holders kind of now understand what level to set the entry bar at. I think they generally want to have some oversight onto what gets on there, but they are generally happy for anything of a high enough quality to get on, or certainly that's true of PS4 and Steam. Microsoft have always been very limited with what they've released. I think they only ever really wanted to release 1 or 2 Xbox Live Arcade games a week, and that served them reasonably well. During the golden age of Xbox Live Arcade, it was a real thing what game was being released that week, and there have been murmurings that that's a bit more successful on Xbox One as well when compared to PS4 having a huge number of titles released all of the time. I think, as a consumer, that's interesting. I mean, always you would say that you want more things, but we always have nostalgia for times when there weren't very many games on a platform and you kind of had more time to hype yourself up over one specific title. So obviously it's good that we live in the future where anything can be released anywhere pretty much, but I have some kind of time for that.
Yeah, there's always that tension between curation and gatekeeping and also access to anything. You want everything to be available on your system. XBlig had a shovelware problem. You can't really talk about XBlig without saying that. It really, there was a lot of just nonsensical, weird. There were about 100 sort of massage in inverted commas programs that just vibrated the controller and stuff like that. It was really kind of the low benchmark of development. But there's something really cool about that as well. Just sort of having this weird part of a system that's as sort of polished and curated as Xbox Live Arcade, where you can get sort of almost anything. There was weird offensive stuff that occasionally made it on there as well. I kind of like that. I like the back alleys.
Definitely. This seems like a good time to mention that Visiting the Village, chopping wood and living in the wilderness correspondent Matthew Mittman actually had a tiny bit of commercial success with a couple of XBlig games. I think he was making a few $100s a month, which, when you live like he does, can actually sustain you for quite a long time.
Yes.
So he made a couple of quite interesting titles. He was really definitely using the XNA version of Talk right. X, I think it was called, to investigate being profitable in that area. So we do know someone who's made some money there.
That's true. Apple announced some new hardware stuff at their thing. Let's delve. Apple TV, it's not really a micro console, just a well-designed TV box that can run apps and has a fairly constrained UI. Also, apps aren't really limited to 200 megabytes, as they download up to 2 gigabytes more after being installed and can stream from 20 gigabytes of online storage. We'll put that one to rights. iPhone 6s, 3D Touch is the thing here, good for shortcuts, but you shouldn't make people have to use it, in the opinion of show producer Jimmy. In that regard, it's like all advanced gestures on iOS. iPad Pro is the big, weird iPad. Very expensive. Producer Jimmy reckons it will sell extremely well in certain creative and enterprise fields. Probably not that many people will buy it proportional to other iPads, so he reckons lots of people will declare it a failure. What are your thoughts on these Apple announcements?
I have quite a few thoughts. The first is I'm still really impressed / terrified by how my Twitter feed explodes during these Apple keynotes. It's just they found a way of really saturating everyone's interest for a short period of time. And as a response to that, I almost wanted to cover this topic last. But here we are, the second topic, and there's a lot of interesting stuff here. So, I mean, it's important to note how Apple are really kings of PR in this area. The Apple TV, I don't have any particular faith that this is going to be disruptive at all. Micro consoles just feel to me like they're not going to work. I think you're either using a cool console that can do some really great graphical stuff, or you're perfectly happy playing a game on your iPad or your phone while you're watching some reality TV in the background. I actually think that it's possible that maybe there's a territory like Brazil or somewhere else like that where for some reason micro consoles take off, but I would definitely bet against that being disruptive in the space. I think it could be really, really good for watching TV though, which is nice. Do you have any pushback on that?
Yeah, I think Apple TV, this makes me think that the Apple TV is considered internally to be a success at Apple. I haven't really read anything about whether, people view it as a success generally. But if you're releasing, this is just Apple TV Plus. This is just the Apple TV with some more stuff in it. And that makes me think that they're kind of bullish on the whole Apple TV idea. This specifically, I don't think is a major move to try and take territory away from anyone, Valve or whatever, or a response to that or whatever. I think it's just them saying, hey, we like this Apple TV thing.
Yeah, I think that's very cogent. I think Apple TV is just this really weird product where it's not really in the zeitgeist, or certainly not in this country. It's not one of those things which is really as massively evangelized by Apple fans as most of their other products. But lots of people have them, and everyone I've talked to who has one says they're really good. So I agree, this is really kind of just a development of a product they already have. In terms of apps, anytime Apple bring apps to something, that's going to be a massive news story. But again, I think what you said was absolutely right. This is just progressing what they already have. So on to the iPhone 6s. I actually am a big fan of 3D Touch. So this is basically a force relative touch interface for your phone. So the harder you touch, it basically can tell how hard you are touching it. And I was thinking about this for certain kind of tactile games. I actually think that this could work really well. What they've been saying is that this really transforms the experience of using a phone, an iPhone. And I'm actually not just going to call that hyperbole. I could really imagine that this feels quite amazing to use, feels a lot more tactile. So I'm quite a fan of that.
Yeah, I agree. I've tried this on a demo Apple Watch. It's going to be quite similar to that, and it works really well. It's a really nice way of adding information to your input. I think, as producer Jimmy says, it's not a thing that you should rely on. It is a bit clunky, but it's just nice to have another way of signifying something. It's one of the problems with developing for these touch devices is that you're quite limited in what you can signify with your input. So that's fine. I think they've got the Taptic engine as well, which I really like, again from the watch. The thing that vibrates in sort of special patterns and stuff. That's quite fun. I like that. So these are nice little innovations that they're just bringing in. And I'm generally like what they're doing with this stuff.
Yeah, I might be a little bit more bullish than especially Jimmer on how fundamental this stuff could be to the interface, but I'll definitely have to try it before I can make an actual declaration on that. And the iPad Pro, this is clearly a shot across the bows of the Surface. The Microsoft Surface Pro is actually really popular, has been a great success for them, and is basically a laptop that that has a cloth keyboard and costs £1,000, and that's pretty much what the iPad Pro is going to be as well. I'm not sure about it being a failure. I think lots of people will buy it because they like buying shiny Apple things. I would be interested to see if they genuinely prefer it to their MacBook Airs, which seems like a reasonably similar product. But this one does have a stylus or like an actual proper design quality pen that comes with it. So I think for using Photoshop, etc., this will be really popular.
Right, yeah, and also Jimmy's point about, if you're a business, you want to show stuff to clients and you want a really massive, nice touchscreen to do that, then this is going to be great for that. So it's kind of a lock there. Also, this thing, it just seems to be the Apple thing. They have an idea and then they just make it in different sizes. And that's just, that's a good way of finding which size is best. So yeah, iPad Pro, it's kind of interesting. I mean, this is a fairly sort of lightweight set of announcements as far as Apple goes, but even so, I think they're just really trying to refine and get right these different ranges of products they've been working on for a while. And yeah, I approve.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing really life-changing here. The 6S could be a good phone. The S's tend to be really the best of the phones to get. I'm completely off on Apple phones nowadays, but otherwise I would be definitely interested in the 6S Plus. So let's move on.
After side-by-side beta period lasting several months, Valve have removed the old version of Dota 2 and replaced it with one running their new Source 2 engine. This makes it the first Source 2 game released, perhaps meaning that the standalone engine will be available for developers soon. Ian Hardingham, is this a good time for Valve to get back in the engine game?
The reason that I wanted to talk about this is that it seemed like in the olden days, new engines were a much bigger deal than they are now. It seems like there's a lot more consolidation in engines, and people just, for whatever reason, don't care anywhere near as much whether you're using Unreal or CryEngine or anything like that, or Source. And I really wanted to talk about Source 2. Source 1 was a really huge deal. And Valve aren't making a particularly big deal about this. I believe this was announced back at GDC this year.
Yep.
And in terms of is this a good time for Valve to get back into the engine game, I do not believe that Source 2 is going to be a competitor to Unity. I wouldn't have thought that they wanted to put the kind of work in to make it as accessible and as comprehensive as Unity. There's the requirement that you at least publish your game on Steam if you use the Source 2 engine. Source 2 engine will be free to use, and everyone's response to that really is, well, we'd like to put it on Steam anyway, so that's not really the end of the world requiring that. I think it could be good. I expect a couple of high-profile games will use it. I'll be interested to see if there are any advantages that it gives you on Steam, whether there are some Steam features that it uses really well or anything. I mean, I'm still a bit unclear about what Valve's approach to that side of the business is at the moment, but I think it's nice to see Source 2, excuse me.
So, I'm a bit confused by this. Do you happen to know if the free licenses are sort of restricted in any way? So, if I'm a big AAA developer, can I just use this for free, or is it for individuals that it's free?
I do not know the answer to that. It's definitely possible. There's a clause that says you have to be grossing less than blah to use it, although I'd be a little bit surprised by that, and I'd actually imagine that Valve would be really happy if a massive AAA was using Source 2 for free, because it would tie them to Steam to a certain extent, so I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, this Eurogame article says free to aspiring developers and modders everywhere. So I think that might imply that there will be some licensing terms. In which case, I guess this makes sense. I mean, it's just an interesting move for them to develop a new engine. I guess they've probably done it so that they can do a new version of Dota. I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's the path here, because they're clearly moving away from development largely. They seem to want to focus on these specific projects. I guess they need to use their own engine if they're going to do these very specific, very infrequent releases.
Yeah, I think that while I probably agree that it's fair to say that they are moving away from development, I still think they're working on enough games to need their own engine. I think that they wouldn't want to start being beholden to Epic or someone else to make their games with. So I guess it's just a question for them of whether Source 2 was always going to remain completely internal, or if they were going to make it an external thing. And I'm glad that they are. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I think to compete in this current engine market, you have to put an awful lot of work into your engine, and I'll be interested to see how many resources they're putting at Source 2, because I think that's a real commitment. And it really depends on what their aims for Source 2 are. Yeah, I mean, if you've got a game as popular as Dota 2 and the Counter-Strike series, you're going to want to have your own engine so you can keep porting forward. So, I mean, I'd love to know how many people they have internally working on the engine, how many people they're going to continue have working on it.
In related news, the Unreal Engine is now providing free assets. Producer Jimmy says the developers, unfortunately no longer known as Epic Mega Games, have released all the source assets to the Infinity Blade game series on the Unreal Engine Asset Store. These assets are free to use, even commercially, but only in projects using UE4. Is this a big deal, or just a way to make their own asset store look good in comparison to Unity's?
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal at all, and I think it is an excellent way of making their asset store look really good. Traditionally, you can often you will be able to get free assets for engines, and the idea of being able to use the assets for Infinity Blade, which is a very good-looking game, on the surface probably seems quite attractive. But the problem is that then you've set the bar of art in your game so high that you have to spend a huge amount on artists to get any new asset to be of that standard, and you can't just make the entire game out of Infinity Blade assets, although I'd be amused to see you try, and maybe you can change some shaders or something so it looks completely different. But basically I think this is kind of a no deal.
I think someone should definitely do that, make a game that uses only Infinity Blade assets, because I think that could work. I think that we haven't really seen the rise of the stock art game. There've been a few, but there haven't been many, and I think someone could make a really, really good game with stock art. There's no reason why it doesn't make sense to do that. People are far too precious about having their own art. If you've got all this good free art out there, then I think you can make something good with it.
Yeah, I'm generally on board with that. I've often wanted to be able to buy the entire assets of an old game relatively cheaply. Yeah. I think I'd be really wary of doing it with this set of assets, given that everyone's going to have access to them and you might not be the only person doing it, and it might get to the point where it really is a bit hard for your game to stand out. You know, if you're the only person who's paid $5,000 to use the assets of some really bizarre old game, then I think that you really mitigate the risk there. On the other hand, if you've got a nice little, I don't know, match 3 or a little platform game or something, and you can just add these in like 10 days and release it and have it looking like that'd be pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't really see that as a threat. Like, I don't think many people are going to go and make games that are just Infinity Blade. I mean, and that would be a really interesting situation as well. But I just don't think, like, if someone made a really good game where they just literally used this art, I think the competition there would be in, like, how good is the game? Is it worthwhile? Is it worth considering? But rather than, oh no, 100 people are going to do this.
Yeah, I think that would be a truly amazing scenario if you had a game that was really on its own massively popular, that happened to look exactly like Infinity Blade. I would really like to see that. But you know, it's not surprising if you're making a game and you realise it's actually really, really good. The first thing you'd want to do at that point was pay some extra money to upgrade the graphics. I mean, you're probably right. People are a little bit too precious about it. I would love to see it happen.
Author and developer Anna Anthropy has released an autobiographical game about her recent experience of getting hit by a car and the aftermath thereof. The game is part of a wider trend in games where players are disempowered by game mechanics in order to provoke a kind of empathy with people who manage a disability or who have undergone traumatic events. Another really interesting article on Boing Boing about this. Ian, what do you make of the empathy game genre?
I think it's nice. I don't have a huge amount to say about it. I think it's really great that Anna Anthropy is able to make games to talk about things that happen in her life that have had an impact on her and enable her to share her experiences with other people. And I think that's really great. One of the things that was said in this article was that it was sad that people couldn't make a living from this kind of game. And I think that's missing the point a little bit. I don't think everything that you do in this area needs to make you a living. And especially if you're doing something somewhat autobiographical, where a lot of the point of the game is the catharsis of getting it out there. I think thinking about it in terms of profit is not where I'd go for this. I don't tend to play these games. I don't tend to like being emotionally... manipulated might be the wrong word, but emotionally affected by things in this direct a manner, but that's just very personal to me. Yeah. So that's great.
Yeah, I think a lot of sensible points there. I mean, I think this is really trespassing on the area of kind of more traditional art, and the commerce around that is kind of a known thing. It tends to be about how important people consider your work to be. And as we see more games and things like this and more kind of quality and workmanship put into them, then I think people generally are starting to accept this as sort of a valid form. And I do feel like kind of a more sustainable lifestyle for people who want to spend all of their time making this kind of work will eventually be possible. I mean, it's obviously very difficult. So a lot of people aren't interested in this and they won't accept it. I also don't tend to play that many games of this style. I did play this game and I really liked it. it. I also liked Dysphoria, which is Anna Anthropy's previous work, and her blog Auntie Pixelante gave us quite a lot of material on Visiting the Village over the years. So I think she is an extremely interesting creator in this area. I do think if you haven't delved into this type of thing before, then do go and give this game a go. It's very interesting. It's a Twine game mixed with a kind of JavaScript action Frogger sequence, which you can't win, and that's you getting hit by the car. And then the Twine game kind of explores quite a lot of detail about her life and about how she felt around the accident. So it kind of both like mocks and trivializes her experience, and then also kind of elevates it to this great important thing to talk about. It's really quite clever.
Awesome.
There have been further reports of popular YouTubers requiring money in exchange for covering a game this week after the developers of Soul Axiom Wales Interactive revealed that one popular personality with, quote, a few million subscribers, close quote, asked for $22,000 in exchange for mentioning a few talking points during the video and providing a link in the description. Apparently the developer declined and the YouTuber didn't make a video, let alone slip in any talking points. Ian Hardingham, what do you make of this YouTube situation?
Well, so this is the first thing to say about this is for the right YouTuber and the right game, coverage could easily be worth $22,000. So I want to be clear when we're setting off on this. We're going to talk, I'm sure, a lot about the ethics of this situation, a lot about journalistic integrity and being open about this kind of thing. But I wanted to start off by saying that we would pay $22,000 for the right kind of placement in the right area for something if it was given in the right way, because YouTubers can have way more impact than that, almost reliably, on certain games. Do you agree with that?
Sure, yeah, yes.
So basically, a lot of people will say $20,000, that's absolutely crazy, that's greedy. I've seen it called greedy online. And the simple fact of the matter is that I don't know exactly who this YouTuber is, but certain high-profile YouTubers could definitely command that amount of money if that's where the market was. Now, in terms of whether YouTubers should generally be requiring money to cover games, the problem is, I think, that if you have a games magazine, you don't really want the reviews section, which is sort of the most important aspect of a games magazine, I think, to be paid for in any way. Now, YouTubers have 1,000 games every month to cover, but they do have a lot of time to cover them as well. So one of the common aspects of this is YouTubers saying they just don't have enough time to really invest in all of the games, and that they think it's fair to ask for money to specifically target game A or game B. And I think there's a fundamental way in which that is different to, you want the whole ecosystem to be based around merit, and you want games to be interesting enough and have enough of a groundswell for people to want to cover them. Am I making any sense, Paul Killer-Taylor?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that this is a bit more complicated than people really give it credit for. Obviously, there are laws about how you describe paid promotion. You can't make it look like editorial. It has to be clearly demarcated, and there's been a lot of talk, certainly in the UK, about strengthening those laws when it comes to YouTubers, particularly YouTubers who have an impressionable young audience and they're holding up a product and going, hey, this is amazing, you should buy this. You know, that's a real case of where you need legal intervention to stop that happening. So let's presume that that's all happening, and that's fine. So if you're paying money to a YouTuber to cover your game and they're going to do it and say, this is basically an advert, here I am doing an advert for this game, and here's some things that I think about it. As long as that's clearly demarcated, that's certainly morally fine. Whether it's good for the brand of those YouTubers is absolutely another matter, and it's completely up to them as to whether they think that's true. I mean, I couldn't imagine, for example, someone like Total Biscuit doing this. He's done videos for games that are on Good Old Games as part of his sponsorship agreement, and he's also, you know, provided a big disclaimer about that at the front of the video, which seemed very clear. And I watched one of those videos and I thought it was interesting. It didn't matter to me that he was doing it because that game happened to be on Good Old Games. So this is really about making sure that it's done clearly and fairly, if it's being done at all, and also about YouTubers being intelligent about protecting their integrity, because the thing that matters most is the value of their opinion, really.
I generally agree with that, but I think where the actual grey area is with the idea that they are only being paid to cover the game, with no expectation, supposedly, that they're going to be positive about it. because as soon as they're doing something that's much more advertorial or specifically paid for in terms of covering a game in a positive way, hitting talking points, that kind of thing, I think that that is a more clear idea of something that exists. But I can imagine these YouTubers saying, well, there are so many games, and if I cover game X, I get $5,000, and if I cover game Y, I don't, and I believe that I can say everything I want to about game X. I can understand you wanting to have your cake and eat it there, and the problems with that really are, it's almost impossible to be objective when you're getting paid. Even if you really dislike this game, and you believe that you're doing the same thing you would do if you picked it up off the shelf and just decided to cover it yourself, you really never are, and there's always more complicated stuff going on. On the other hand, there's just an awful lot of money being involved here. The one thing I will say with complete certainty is that there will be at least one high-profile YouTuber who's taking money behind the scenes who will not declare it, because it's too easy to do without getting caught.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That certainly is happening, and it's very problematic. I mean, I think your point is valid, but also it's kind of based on a hypothetical that would never happen. So it's the case of like a bad game paying money, and then the YouTuber saying, well, I'm going to say what I would have said about it anyway. That's just not going to happen. It's either going to be something that they're kind of ambivalent towards, or that they already like. So in many ways, it kind of doesn't make sense that anyone would take that approach.
Well, maybe you misinterpret me. I think maybe I should just talk about the ambivalent game. So yeah, sure, they're going to cover the games they like anyway. So they take some money to cover a game that they are generally ambivalent about. And if they were covering this normally, they would spend a lot of time being negative about certain aspects and a lot of time being positive about certain aspects. And what I'm saying is that they're just it's not going to be the same thing if they're being paid. They're going to take a slightly different approach. They're not going to focus on the negative stuff as much. They're going to focus on the positive stuff a little bit more. And you were talking about their brand, which I think is really important. A lot of people's brand, like Total Biscuits, for instance, is having a certain kind of way of talking, way of being, and I think that's going to be compromised as well. So, I still think it's something where people are just going to say, I want to have my cake and eat it, but they can't really.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's not realistic to expect a review or, the analog of a review to be the same if it's being paid for by the developer, even if you're genuinely ambivalent about the game. I mean, because in that situation, you'd have to run the risk of delivering a video that the developer didn't like. And that's just, as you say, it's just not going to happen. So I do think that people need to kind of understand almost every games magazine and every game site has had advertorial, and a lot of this now is the response to ad block and the response to the general saturation of adverts. In which order you want to place those in terms of importance, probably beyond the scope here. But people have to find ways of advertising their products, and this is a very potent way that sort of neatly skips around those issues.
Yeah, I think it works best with this kind of semi-advertorial stuff, where you find a personality or a site or whatever that already really likes your product.
Yeah.
It works by far the best when you have someone who's already a fan of Frozen Synapse or something, and you can say to them, look, we know you like it, your fans know you like it, obviously your fans also quite like it, let's do a sponsorship deal. And it's funny how once that has happened, everything seems so much more natural and so much more ethical, and there's so many fewer problems than when you're basically trying to get attention for a game that someone isn't particularly interested in and trying to push it.
Right.
So I don't know about trying to advertise in this modern age. I find advertorial to be incredibly boring, but it's at least ethical.
Right, and it's all about the right synergy, and that's what advertising is supposed to be. Advertising works best when the person seeing it likes it and understands it, and a good way of doing that is basically supporting a personality that people like, which is what sponsorship can do. It can be a positive thing, but it all has to be very clear and above board, and I'm just glad that that's happening more now, and there's more pressure on people to do it in the right way. Now that a fair chunk of the initial rush of Kickstarter game projects have delivered a final product, Rock Paper Shotgun had a look at the state of crowdfunding in 2015. One thing discussed was whether there should be a contractual obligation to deliver a game placed on developers. RPS seemed to agree that backers should instead be more aware that their pledges are speculative. Do you think we're in a new era of crowdfunding?
Well, I think we're in a stable era of crowdfunding. I basically agree with Rock Paper Shotgun, and we're going to talk in a little bit about a game creator that failed to deliver their game and has been ordered by the court to pay damages to their backers. And I actually think this is really bad for everyone. To be completely honest, I feel that the vast majority of people who back games on Kickstarter are actually fairly clear about how speculative this is and how they're actually they're not just buying a product, they're sort of buying belief in a dream and buying participation in a certain thing that they're very excited about. Yeah. And I think that it would be better if developers didn't feel completely under the gun to deliver something, because if you're looking at the situation where a developer wasn't going to finish a game, if they're suddenly contractually obliged to do that, then the game that they're going to deliver is going to be bad. So it's not really a better situation than one that we don't give you one to start with. And it might have lots of negative aspects on development. So for that specific question, I would be against having any legal necessity to deliver. For games, I think that Kickstarter is always often used for like hardware, like buying a watch or something, where it's almost more of a pre-order tool than it is a kickstarting tool, and I think it's different in that case.
Yeah, I think culturally people have now internalised... I mean, there's some quite funny debate about this on the RPS piece, which you should read. They've now internalised the idea that it is a kind of weird, speculative, possible pre-order that could not happen, and not investing and not just actually pre-ordering something that will definitely arrive. It's a new thing, and I think our brains have categorised what putting money into a Kickstarter is about. So I don't really have a problem with... I don't think you need more hardcore pressure on developers. As you say, perfectly correctly, the negative externality of that is that everything that will be produced will be bad. So there's no point putting that in whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's also going to stop people putting stuff out there on Kickstarter to find out whether people like it or not. Yes. You and I have talked about using Kickstarter as a tool to work out whether a game that we think is really exciting is actually exciting to a lot of other people as well. And I think that the idea that Kickstarter does is no longer allowed to have these really crazily speculative things, because a lot of people would be too scared by the legal implications of it, would be really bad. Like Kickstarter's this Kickstarter's a fairyland, and if you ever thought that it wasn't that, then I think you were sort of kidding yourself. It's nice to see people spend a bit of time and money creating an awesome pitch video, actually thinking through their ideas to the extent to which they can present it on a crowdfunding website, and then seeing what people think about it. And I don't think the lawyers have to be involved with that. Again, I think that it gets really complicated when you're buying a piece of hardware, and that's almost just a misuse of Kickstarter for me. Maybe misuse is the wrong word, but it just seems very different to games.
Sure. I mean, also one of the things from this piece that kind of intrigued me was the general negativity that all the RPS guys have about their kickstarting activities. Like, I've kickstarted 3 things. 2 of them were books by the amazing ROM Alerts, and the first one was so good that I then went and backed the second one. And the other thing was Satellite Rain. And all of those things delivered and were very, very high quality. So I don't know if it's... I feel like maybe I am, because I'm an incredibly annoying, skeptical person, I do kind of look at things that I think will definitely happen and have a good chance of being good before I put money into Kickstarters. And I guess a lot of people get a bit sort of overexcited with it.
Well, yeah, I think you're selecting quite well there for things that are going to be good enough if they're solid. And I think that generally, I think the best you can hope for with Kickstarter is a solid game.
Right, yeah.
And the problem is that actually is against what's kind of being sold with a lot of pitch videos. The developers are very excited and they want to make the best thing ever, and they want to make it one of your top 5 games ever. And I really don't think that's likely to happen out of Kickstarter for whatever reasons. It's just not something that I've ever believed in. I've never kickstarted something, actually, and I've yet to see something that I'm sufficiently excited about and have a good faith that's going to be done in a particularly good way. What I'd really like to kickstart is a company that comes in and produces these games properly. Once someone's got a great idea, someone come and help them execute it properly, because that's what I always worry about happening with this kind of thing. So I think it's good that if you're buying a Mega Drive coffee table book, that's probably going to be done really well if you believe in the people who are writing it, the people who are producing it, which cannot be said if you're buying some kind of amazing space game. Yeah. So I tip my hat to your intelligence, sir.
That's what this is all about, just aggrandizing myself. I think I have this problem with Kickstarter now, which is that if I see something good that I want, I think there is literally no point me taking the risk of backing this because it will get funded and then I can buy it when it's released. So there's no incentive for me to take the risk because I don't want extra gold statues and posters and, you know, my face in the game. I don't want those things because I work in games and I kind of, you know, I can put my face in one of our games. So I'm in an unusual situation there.
No, you definitely can't, sorry.
Okay, well now I've got a reason. But you know what I mean? Like there's this kind of
I know exactly what you mean, but
problem.
it's just not for us, I don't think. Like, so much of the pleasure is like a part-time hobbyist thing of being slightly involved with the production of a game, and you're a fan. I mean, I don't know what would be a good simile for me in something else, what I'm a huge fan of, but I'd like to have my face on a Scooter album or something, you know. Like, it's about being fanboys of a media that you don't work in. So I'm sort of not surprised that doesn't really do it for us, because we spend all day every day with the reality of games development.
Yeah, also, I mean, I think some of the ways these stuff is implemented, we did the face in the game thing with Frozen Synapse, and the way, like, people actually literally have their photo in the game and you can just find it in the UI, and I just think that's hilarious. Like, that's really good. I'm pleased that we were able to deliver that to people. If I'm one of those people, I'm going to be happy with it. So with that kind of thing, yes, you're right. It's about what is the one thing that you're a fan of? Would I like to be in the background of Blade Runner 2? Of course I would. So there you go. I'm not immune to this stuff, but it's just weird to kind of look at it from this perspective, and also to kind of know roughly which things are gonna be big successes and which things are gonna fail, and just sort of have no incentive to get involved, really.
Yeah, I'm glad in general that Kickstarter has stabilised now. Like, I feel like it's not going to change particularly, that people are in general at terms with it.
Related, one organisation that has firmly made up its mind regarding Kickstarter's pledges is the Washington State Office of the Attorney General. They've ordered tabletop game developer Altius Management to pay $54,000 in damages and legal fees to the 31 Washington State-based backers of their tabletop card game after allegedly failing to deliver. I'm guessing you don't think this is the right way to handle this?
Well, I think that there's actually quite a lot of interesting things going on here. So this is for an actual card game, for a real physical life card game, and I think aspects of it really talk to how we feel about digital goods versus physical goods. Everyone who backed this game was promised to be shipped a physical thing, and for some reason I think that's viewed differently as to being promised to ship a digital game. Also, the card game was, I think, significantly further along than most Kickstarted games, and it looks like there definitely could be some foul play, or at least extreme idiocy, involved in this. So, as I was saying earlier, I think that there are sort of two different kinds of Kickstarter in this way. And of course, something that we haven't just talked about is that there are some people who go on Kickstarter solely in order to defraud people. But, you know, in general, you don't want to ruin the entire ecosystem just because there are some guys playing it badly, and you should be able to tell from a pitch video. Pitch videos are pretty hard to make, and generally it's quite easy to find out if someone is being an idiot in games, so that there is always that aspect. I don't know if the Washington State Office of the Attorney General needs to get involved. It's a dangerous precedent, I guess.
There's some weird stuff with this. Apparently some people, according to Polygon, received these decks of cards before July. So some people have got it and other people haven't, which is just a really weird situation. So yes, in this particular case, it does look pretty weird. The Attorney General's office issued a statement, and it says Washington State will not tolerate crowdfunding theft. So they definitely consider it theft on some level, sort of misleading on some level. So the details of this do seem to be quite complicated. I also don't like how this feels to me. I'm kind of back with the RPS supposition that it should be on the person pledging. I think companies should be required to give enough information that people can make that decision reasonably.
Yeah, I just don't see a way this can work, basically, if there's too much legal requirement. So given the two possibilities of either this current scenario or not having Kickstarter at all, I would definitely rather have this current scenario. So I guess it's just draft some laws to make sure people understand and have to be properly notified that they're pledging, not buying, and then let everyone get on with it.
Esports conglomerate Team Dignitas are having to sell one of their LoL teams due to Riot's competition rules only allowing one team per organisation. Apparently owner Michael Odell has had offers of over $500,000 already. What do you think about the value of an esports team?
I think this is pretty cool. This is another step on the road to legitimacy or mainstreamness if you can sell and buy esports teams. I was pretty surprised. I'm going to take him at his word that he's had at least one offer of over $500,000. Generally, it's hard, I believe, to make money as an esports team. And I was wondering, because when you buy, say, an American pro sports team, you generally are doing it as more of a prestige purchase than as something to be profitable. You're not expecting it to go down in value, so you're not setting that money on fire. You're hoping that it retains its value, you can sell it. But it's not really about a clever investment as much as it is about owning a sports team. And I guess that must be going on here. I guess we're starting to get rich people who love the idea of owning a Counter-Strike team.
Right, yeah, that's absolutely what a lot of this is. It's about being involved with esports and, kind of enjoying it and then, hoping to maybe make your money back at some point. $500,000, I actually think, I don't know much about how good Dignitas are at LoL. I don't really follow LoL that much. $500,000 I felt is a little bit low for an entire team. So maybe it's like their B team or something. Well, in fact, it must naturally be their B team because they're keeping another team. So
let me just stop you there. Actually, they haven't decided which one to sell yet.
Oh, really? Okay, that's
they have
amazing.
to sell one of them because they're only allowed to have one team per organisation or something. And they haven't decided. They're taking bids on both teams, the American and the European team, and they're just going to wait and see which offer they like more.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting business idea there. That's kind of interesting. I guess, yes, because the value of an esports team is only linked to but not directly proportional to performance, that it's actually quite a hard thing to value because it's all about the sponsorship revenue for the teams, and that is about what are the personalities of the players like. You can have some, certainly in StarCraft, you have some quite bad players who make a lot more money than good players because their personalities and the community knows them and they are good at negotiating sponsorship deals and so on. So the actual ability to value an esports team, I think, is pretty difficult.
Yeah, and what's the length of contract they have over these players? I could imagine it being quite a long, onerous contract because there'll be lots of people who want to get into pro sports, and the organisations can probably wield a lot of leverage when giving the contract, but that's important as well. I would love to see someone write an actual piece on the valuation of these things, but the market just probably isn't anywhere near enough mature enough yet. But it's a really cool story, and I'm really excited to watch a bit more Counter-Strike in the future and try and get into an understanding of what those teams are like. And I really hope that some leagues properly develop as being dominant leagues and you can start to see some fun pro sports things going on there.
Grantland had a massively long and typically circuitous article earlier this week about the launch party for NBA Live 2015. In it, they go into some detail about the history of the franchise and how the party is an attempt to get trendsetters talking about a series that is no longer well regarded. Ian Hardingham, what do you think about this weird need for sports games to be mainstream cool?
Yeah, reading about this party, and they've got like Kanye West there, and they've got all sorts of different celebrities there, and it felt sort of so mainstream, like so post-mainstream, so absolutely crazy, so like not particularly gamer culture, so something else. And the understanding that really sports games are kind of much more to do with sports than they are to do with computer games nowadays, which I know is kind of a weird and slightly silly thing to say, but it's kind of a huge number of NFL players play Madden all the time, and it almost feels like those games are more just attached to the league than it is to the console they're on, or something like that. I don't really know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I agree.
It feels like the kind of thing what Microsoft try and do with the Halo launch parties, that kind of thing, like this really massively over-the-top thing. I'm not particularly happy at the little jibe that producer Jimmy put into this about Grantland, one of my favourite websites of all time. It was interesting reading a little history about NBA Live and how it was massive in the 90s and then was overtaken by NBA 2K. And probably my most predominant thought about this is I think it's really sad that there's exclusive licensing of these leagues, because I think it was such a great system when there were like 8 different companies making football games, 8 different companies making basketball games. You got some really amazing results out of that.
You did. Yes, in typical Visiting the Village style, you've blamed Jimmy for something.
Did you write that, did you?
Because this story kind of, the form of this story, though, it does kind of represent its content, because as you said, these things are very tangentially related to games now. They're kind of this weird thing in their own right. They have their own weird milieu of actual players, celebrities, and game developers and fans. There are so many people who just have a console and they just have like the one sports game they like and maybe Call of Duty and that's it. Like that is a definite type of game player. And I actually think that's really cool, and it's a really good thing for games that now games are considered to be the adjunct to the thing you think is cool and not just like a weird hobby in their own right. These games, I mean, I'm so interested in the wars, like the Pro Evo FIFA wars, and the NBA Live and the whatever the 2K one is wars. I tried to play a basketball game a couple of years ago. It was too complicated. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I've never been a fan. I'm not particularly a fan of watching basketball, and I've never got into the games. But yeah, these games feel like so much more of a facet of being a fan of that sport, like owning a jersey or a cap or playing fantasy. That seems like that really where their identity lie, and the most amazing thing about basketball games is probably the animation. I think we both shared this thought when we saw a new NBA 2K game in London a couple of years ago. And, you know, for a couple of seconds, it would look like we were watching footage of an actual match. And then it would look like an animation disaster for 2 seconds. And it was like, Uncanny Valley really doesn't cover it. Like it's just in trying so hard to get every little thing right. Sometimes it works all of the time, and then sometimes it just looks absolutely terrible. So I think that sports games, there's so much money in them, and the decision-making process of how you deal with them is so interesting. They're so different from other games, basically.
More sports games now. EA are reinstating mobile app and web access to the Ultimate Team feature in this year's FIFA after it was suspended in the past due to unauthorized coin trading by bots. Amazing. Has the Ultimate Team aspect of FIFA now overshadowed the actual game?
I don't actually know the answer to that. I know that FIFA Ultimate Team, which is this online mode where it's basically... you might call it a free-to-play game, although you have to own the game as well, where you're buying players and then you're playing Match to FIFA online against the people with those players, and you either have to grind a lot, or in order to hold a really competitive team, you have to pay quite a lot of money just to sustain your players. So it's quite an expensive game to play, but it's also very popular. I don't know honestly the answer to the question of whether or not it's overshadowed the actual game, but it's pretty huge. I'm always interested in how the marketplaces for these big free-to-play games evolve, and one of the things that makes Ultimate Team really interesting and easy to talk about is that it makes a lot more sense. You understand that you've got to have this team. The rules are quite simple, unlike trying to work out what the value of a gem is in something else. So they've obviously got a problem with online trading that they think they've got past now. So they had set quite a severe range of price limits around player cards, which they've now massively increased and decreased the edges of those, so that hopefully, so you're going to see like a much bigger range of player prices. I mean, I have to say, I was reading about this and I was just kind of feeling a bit depressed about the idea of charging people money to maintain their cards, basically. It's like if you had to pay money to stop your Magic the Gathering cards bursting into flames. And I was just kind of... I know we're in the Brave New World and people are trying lots of different kinds of commerce with this, but I just felt depressed by that idea.
Yeah, that's not really very nice. It's like your virtual pet dying, except it's Eric Cantona instead of a... Now, how about that for a football reference? That's only for 30 years out of date.
Well
Amazing.
done.
I try. So I'm going to talk about my experience of this now. So as every person who hits the age of 30 does, you have this huge realization that you don't understand teenagers anymore. You don't understand what they say, you don't understand how they dress, and you don't understand the things they like. So when I was going through one of these crises, I went on YouTube and I looked at some FIFA YouTubers, because I knew that FIFA YouTube was a thing. And a lot of the videos that FIFA YouTube make, they all have names like Mr. Buzzy and they have like a picture of their head in a big star, and then the title of the video is like amazing coins opening 10 packs and like 15 exclamation marks. And then you play it and it's them just like going through the new players they've been dealt in whatever facet of Ultimate Team it is, and then they get a player they like and they say the player's surname in a funny voice and they scream and they fall off their chair and dubstep music plays, and that's what teenagers do now. So to see that happening as a facet of the games industry that I just wasn't aware of, these people are basically playing a free-to-play card trading game, and they're like these cool football-loving teenagers, and all of these videos have 15 million views. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, Ultimate Team has been really one of the, I think, slightly less talked about massive successes in free-to-play, or free-to-play star. I have to be completely honest that I don't think I fully understand why changing the allowed prices of card reselling was a way of reducing this problem with bots and piracy and people trading outside the game. I really tried, and there was the piece I was reading was lacking a core piece of information, so I kind of feel like I'm reporting badly on that. But there was something, and bots were involved, and something happened, and then something else happened, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
Right, that's the end of that. Now, Mr. Hardingham, do we have an Ian's Magic Corner for this week?
You know, we actually kind of don't have an Ian's Magic Corner this week, and I deeply apologise for that.
Right, that's fine. It will have a rest for this week. It will gently slumber on its bed of magic cards.
It will be back.
It will be back. So instead, we're going to move on to games that were released this week in 2005, thanks to Eurogamer. And on the 14th of September 2005, we had Midway Arcade Treasures 3 on the Xbox. Now, Ian, let me break this down for you, because you might be asking, Paul, what is an arcade treasure? Well, I'm going to tell you. Here are some treasures of the arcade: Badlands, Off-Road Thunder, Race Driving, and my personal favourite, San Francisco Rush the Rock Alcatraz Edition, Stun Runner, Super Off-Road, which I have heard of, Hydro Thunder, which I haven't, and San Francisco Rush 2049, which I can only imagine is the near-future version of San Francisco Rush the Rock Alcatraz Edition. So that's that. Moving on to the 15th of September.
No, don't move on. I was just speechless for a second, because I actually have a surprisingly large amount to say about this. I'm not particularly sure why these are... I assumed that Midway Arcade Treasures was going to have, like, asteroids in it.
I know.
These are some fairly modern games. In terms of San Francisco Rush the Rock Alcatraz Edition, I'm really hoping there are other editions about other rocks that you have to rush. And this is genuinely one of 7 rocks that you can rush in this series. Because otherwise it seems really unnecessary to have the Alcatraz edition. But San Francisco Rush 2049 is a really amazingly great console racer. It's a fabulous game that I played a huge amount on, I think, the Dreamcast, that has a great multiplayer battle mode.
Wow.
It's really fun. It's actually one of my favourite racing games of all time, and I'd completely forgotten about it until I heard you making some kind of joke about it. Hydro Thunder, I'm pretty sure was originally an N64 game from early on in the N64's life cycle. I had some really interesting water effects, and I never got it, but I always was sort of slightly intrigued by it. So I'm actually kind of desiring of playing Midway Arcade Treasures 3.
Yeah, you are completely correct about Hydro Thunder, unusually. 15th of September 2005 was FPS Creator on the PC. Now, I looked into this a bit. This was quite controversial. I think some people really loved FPS Creator, but most of the reviews seem to just be complaining about things that it could or couldn't do. It seemed to be kind of in the legacy of those kind of weird game creation packages, the best of which was, of course, the Games Factory, which I think was before this.
Yeah, I do vaguely remember FPS Creator, and I think the problem with it really was that it was just much worse than modding Half-Life.
Yeah. Right.
It wasn't particularly easier than modding Half-Life, and you didn't get any of the cool assets. It never really took off, as I remember, but I'm sure some people really enjoyed playing around with it.
Moving on to the 16th of September, we've got Burnout Legends on the PSP. Burnout was a good franchise. EverQuest 2 Desert of Flames on the PC. EverQuest still staggering onwards at this point. The kind of amazing Fahrenheit on the PS2, PC, and Xbox, which I think you liked quite a lot, didn't you, Fahrenheit?
I did. I bought the American version, which was called Indigo
really
Prophecy.
Yes.
Let me just make sure that that's correct.
Or is that I thought that was a previous game, but you may well be right. Frantic typing ensues.
Yes, no, Fahrenheit was called Indigo Prophecy in North America, and Indigo Prophecy is a much cooler name, in my opinion. Sorry, fans of the famous book Fahrenheit. Yeah, I quite liked it. I didn't really get very far with it. I believe Visiting the Village Magic the Gathering correspondent Tom Richards is a huge fan of these games, though.
Right. Kuon is a sort of Japanese survival horror thing on the PS2. Mega Man 04 on the GBA is the kind of game that you now see on Awesome Games Done Quick, sort of a kind of sub-par Mega Man game. NHL 2006 on PS2, PC and Xbox. The Sims 2 Nightlife, the endless march of Sims 2 expansion packs had not slowed down by this point. Total Overdose on the PS2, PC and Xbox. Now, Total Overdose is, quote, an open-world action-adventure third-person shooter game that was developed by Deadline Games, and it is this kind of weird, like, it's got something to do with the DEA in Mexico. It really looks like the kind of forerunner to Boiling Point in some ways for me. It's got the special attacks are called Loco moves. It seems like it has the slight air, the slight tinge of the good old racism going on there. Yeah. I don't know what you make of Total Overdose. Did you play Total Overdose?
I didn't. It looks more... I don't know if I think it looks a lot like Boiling Point. It looks a little bit more like a predecessor to the Just Cause series.
Right.
Yes, and you're right. There are some racially questionable images on this Google search for it. And I think, was it the sequel was called Chili Con Carnage? Which is a pretty cool name for anything.
They didn't think they'd gone quite far enough with the first one. Finally, we've got Ys, the Ark of... I'm not going to say that. Napishtim. That sounds like something a drunk Glaswegian would shout at you. On the
I read
PS2.
that as nepotism to start with, which would be a cool arc to have. And I just want to thank the producer for telling us how to pronounce Ys, which is spelt capital Y-S, which I've always called Wise.
Yes.
And he's really looking out for us there. I really think we should give him a day off for this.
He's doing well. Yes, absolutely. And now it's time for this should get a bell. Now it's time for the top 10 UK Steam games. And we start with the most interesting one, which is at number 10, and that's Soma, which is available for pre-order. It is the new game from Frictional, developers of Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is interestingly free on Steam at the moment. I think it still will be when this podcast comes out, which is kind of an interesting move by them. Soma is kind of an underwatery, sort of slightly Bioshock-esque first-person horror explorer-y thing, and it looks very good. I think the art looks very nice. I'm happy to see them continue their sort of march in that direction. Number 9 is Pro Evo Soccer 2016. Number 8 is Mad Max. Number 7 is Fallout 4. Number 6 is Rocket League. Number 5 is Ark Survival Evolved. Number 4 is The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth, which is a pre-order. Number 3 is Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Number 2 is Grand Theft Auto 5. And number 1 is, of course, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Do you have any thoughts?
Why are there so many pre-order games in the top 10 every time?
Yeah.
This is my thought. I don't really... I'm just looking up the Fallout 4 pre-order to see if you get a free game with it, because they do that quite often, but that's not the case. I'm just really surprised. I mean, the top 10 games on Steam, a lot of people are buying them. Yeah. And I'm just kind of just intrigued by Fallout 4's not out for ages.
I know.
And Pro Evo, do people really pre-order that? So yeah, I'm that actually boggles me a little bit.
Well, I think if you're a franchise fan, you just get excited as soon as it's available to purchase. I think it's that purchase pleasure thing. Like you want the feeling of buying it, so you buy it. And also now there's this whole thing of like everyone gets online and they all wait for it to unlock and stuff, and you're the first person possible. I think that's what it is. But it's quite striking how, I mean, even The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth on pre-order it is quite astonishing. Right,
I'm gonna try pre-ordering Fallout 4 later, and if I get any kind of rush, I'll tell you on the next podcast.
Okay, yes, we'll have a Vice-style article about your experiences with the heady sensation of pre-ordering a game. Listener questions now. Miodrag Kovacevic says, what kind of music works best in a fighting game? Background, like in Mortal Kombat, loud theme songs, like in Guilty Gear, or adaptable, I guess he means dynamic music. How would you do music for a fighting game if you worked on one? one. Well, I kind of did do music for a fighting game, which was our first title, Determinants. I think the theme song, Guilty Gear, the theme songs are quite oppressive and intense, like everything about Guilty Gear, which is just a kind of insane vomit of colour and sound. So I probably wouldn't do that. The Mortal Kombat stuff, it's okay. It doesn't. I think somewhere between the two. I like things that have a nice tune, that kind of are good. I don't think dynamic music would work in a fighting game at all, even if you try to do it in a good way.
No, fighting games, the stuff changes too fast. I can't imagine that you'd be able to get the music keeping up in any kind of good way, and it would just probably be absolutely terrible, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Aubrey Hesselgren.
Hold on.
Yes.
Hold on. I generally play fighting games on mute, because I'm often playing them on the Vita or something, and I tend to be listening to a TV instead. I do really like the music in Street Fighter 2, that kind of thing, but generally I think the music should be quite quiet.
Everything should just have the music from Street Fighter 2. It's amazing. And they've done a good job. Capcom did that awesome release where they had all the remixed versions of the original music, which I really liked as well. I'd love to see more devs do that. Devs, get in touch with Overclocked Remix if you've got a big franchise and get them to do remixes. It's actually a travesty that the new Deus Ex games haven't done that. Have a bunch of remixes in your game. Not only is it free, but because you own all the publishing, if you've done it right, but you get to give a platform to these awesome remixes. So there we go. That's my shout out for remixing. Right. Aubrey Hesselgren says, can you have too many frames a second?
Well, I was thinking about this quite a lot.
Yes.
I think if you had like 1 billion frames a second, your computer might explode, which would be too many. So yes.
I think that I'm going to answer this question seriously. I think people get a bit upset when there's a conscious choice made to use a lower frame rate for certain sections of a game or certain style, because they equate frame rate as just like being good. So the higher the frame rate, the better it is. So I think, yes, you can have too many frames a second. Let people have their stylistic things. It's not all about your tech ballsack. Jonathan Whiting asks, a game you'd love to make but hate to play, and a game you'd hate to make but love to play. Do you have any thoughts on this, or would you like me to just waffle pointlessly?
Well, the second one's a lot easier. Right. I'm pretty sure I'd hate to make like MGS5, but certainly like playing it. And actually, to answer the first question, a game you'd love to make but hate to play. I mean, quite often programmers really enjoy the process of making systems and making games, but don't ever want to use those systems. So I think a lot of mistakes are made when a programmer's like much more excited about the way he's going to execute making a game than he is about actually playing it.
I think I'd love us to make like a really super nerdy, like spreadsheety management game of something, and that's not the kind of game that I'd really ever play. I mean, we did some management stuff in Cortex, but that was kind of at a level that was accessible to me. I'd be interested in making some like absolutely mad level of detail management game, but I probably
if we ever do that, it'll be an expansion for Cortex, I think.
Right, okay. Awesome. Kotaku UK ask, if you could Fulton airlift anyone, living or dead, back to your mother base, who would it be?
Garrett, alive.
I would lift Kim Coates back to my mother base.
While he was saying cellular phones.
I would get him to do all the voice acting for every bad guy in every game. Alex Connolly asked, are games deft delivery systems, for spreading awareness on greater societal issues? Think Fate of the World, Depression Quest, This War of Mine, etc. Are they A, reaching demographics that would otherwise bypass or sidestep concepts like mental health, refugees, or climate change? B, making noise in an echo chamber where the audience is already in agreement or aware thereof? C, simply being undermined by the fact that these are games with inherent gaminess, where interaction inadvertently trivializes the topics they're striving to promote or investigate? What a question! What do you think?
What a question. I think I need some time to respond.
Sure.
I mean, This War of Mine is apparently a very good game. I haven't played it. I think that there are times when a game can make you think deeply about something, although I have to say, I have far more of those times when I'm reading a book than I do when I'm playing a game. I mean, I'm trying to remember the last time a game made me really change my viewpoint about some real-world issue. I mean, I tend to be playing games to relax and kind of want to turn my mind off to those sort of things. I mean, I feel like games for sort of young people, kids in school, can sometimes be both entertaining and educational at the same time. In terms of an echo chamber, I mean, some of these games have such a narrow audience that they're only going to be played by people who already believe that whaling is bad. Well, sorry, not believe whaling is bad, already massively anti-whaling. Or eco warriors or something like that. So there's probably an aspect of that. And I mean, if you want a game to be noticed, it has to be a good game, I suppose.
I think basically all of the points that Alex raises are kind of difficulties that someone trying to make a game which has any partial attempt to do this has to deal with. I don't think that you can't. Do I think it's been done badly a lot of the time? Yes, I do. But I have definitely thought about kind of larger issues from narratives of games or when playing games. I mentioned Dysphoria earlier. I think that's a good example of a game that can make you think about someone else's experience in quite an effective way, but it's still kind of fun and a bit cheeky and a bit aware that it's sort of kind of making a big point in this sort of quite artsy way. Like, that was very poorly expressed, but you know what I mean. So I think that these are just things that people juggle around. The echo chamber thing absolutely can happen, and I do think that's a failure of a game trying to raise a larger issue. I was very happy the other day where someone commented on a news article about Google being able to rig an election, that it was like the plot of Frozen Synapse, because that was one of the ideas that I was working with, and I did try to, in amongst some of the silly jokes, I did try and deal with some thematic stuff that I thought was actually interesting. So that was good. So yes, it's a complicated topic, but a very interesting, a very detailed question. Thank you very much.
Good question, Alex.
Right, let's move on to Cheshire's special section of the show. He's got some thoughts and questions this week. We were talking about the difficulty of launching certain types of games on Steam, and he says, what is a good category for Steam? If action platformer is a bad category, what is appropriate? Is Steam fundamentally about RPGs, FPS, and strategy?
Well, survival games as well.
Survival games, yeah.
Huge. So things are a little bit like Minecraft if they're not in that genre. Yeah, you and I think strategy is quite solid on Steam.
Yeah, definitely. I also think Steam is good for genre-busting stuff. I think the PC can be quite good for innovative, non-genre-y things still. But yeah, I mean, I think survival horror games are good on Steam, generally seem to do quite well.
It still tends to be true that a game that looks like it is better on a controller will tend to not do as well on Steam, although I think that's not really true of driving games. But stuff like top-down shooters and action platformers, I mean, I just generally don't like action platformers particularly, but that's also like a thing. Like, I don't think top-down shooters do amazingly on Steam.
No. On bridge cheating, Cheshire says, let me get this straight. You spend most of your time in the game trying to not accidentally cheat due to knowing your partner too well?
Yeah, I have no response to that. I mean, that's actually there's quite a lot of truth in that.
Okay, good. On Anita Sarkeesian, he says, I will echo Ian's terror in discussing content with this level of controversy. In general, I find Anita's video to be thought-provoking and useful for making me aware of social issues I was oblivious to due to not being negatively impacted by them directly. That's very well phrased. I believe that being extreme in your form is necessary to get above the noise and start the conversation. The conversation is started, at least in some areas, so now we need to find a way to turn it into a useful conversation. I mean, way to go, agreeing with both of us there, Cheshire.
That was very, very cogent. I like it.
Metal Gear Solid 5, he says, you talked me into playing it, and it really concerns me that people actually listen to what you say.
So am I.
I was on the fence, but you hit all the right points. Thief, Hitman, stealth combat transitions seems worth a shot. While Dishonored may not have been a perfect game, the stealth mechanics left positive impressions for me, even if I can't remember them precisely. So yeah, I'm still partially sold on this. I'm thinking about giving it a go.
For my next trick, I'd like to talk you into playing Frozen Cortex.
Ah.
When we talked about it, we actually saw each other in real life yesterday, and we talked a little about Metal Gear Solid 5, and I'm still thoroughly enjoying it. One of the aspects that I'm really liking is how you can kind of have downtime between missions to just sort of fanny around at Mother Base, just doing a bunch of fun stuff, which is really nice when a game is really working for you.
And game success, he says, you talked about making a game you want to play. It seems that you'd be really tired of your own game after years of developing it. I remember a comment that you were glad Cortex was still fun for you even late in development. Any tips on how to achieve that?
Well, you'll tend to massively focus on whatever's wrong with the game you've made or are making. So certainly try and address those issues. I mean, one of the things that makes it harder for me to play Synapse at the moment is that I still really hate it when people use the distraction tactic, something that we are looking at addressing on some level. I'll leave it at that. So generally, you should be taking an approach of like playing the game, and if you don't like something about it, you should be fixing it, as long as it's sane to fix it.
I mean, the kind of games that you design, I'm very lucky in that they generally tend to be things that I'm happy to put time into, because the mechanics are sort of sufficient that there's always going to be some component of learning, that you can go for. I tend to have the problem in that I like to consider myself to be good at multiplayer if I play a multiplayer game seriously, and by the end of development I haven't had time to play enough. So all the beta community and of course Visiting the Village, having a beard and throwing knives correspondent Robin is normally a lot better than me, so I just find it kind of depressing, so difficult.
Whereas I make games that I'm specifically good at, so even with less practice I can usually beat Robin.
That is very true. Right, that's the end of that. Let's have a brief the television and film lounge area, which was postponed from the previous week, so it's going to be horribly out of date. I'm going to talk about Orange is the New Black, which I am very behind on. To me, this looked like not the kind of show that I would enjoy, but you convinced me to watch it, and I'm at the sort of early part of season 3 now. And it's really good. It has this really weird tension between wanting to have emotionally rich characters and wanting to be a comedy, and sometimes it really falls down the hole. I think it was kind of considered to be one of the most effective recent dramedies, which is a word that I absolutely hate. Things about it I find interesting. It was obviously based on the main character's prison memoirs, which I'm kind of very interested to read. And the early part of the first series is very sort of feels quite realistic, and a lot of the things that happen to the character happen to her, and then it goes into a soap in the middle of season 2, which is absolutely terrible, and then it comes out of that and starts finding its own identity. But you're a pretty big fan of this show, aren't you?
Well, I'm a big fan. I think you're right that it doesn't always work, but it works a lot of the time, and I think the comedy is really good.
Yeah.
It's probably the best show I've ever seen at really subverting your expectations for where a gag's going to go.
Yes.
They really will set something up and then they'll do something completely different to what you're expecting. I really like a lot of the characters. It's amazing they managed to get so many great actresses in this
yes.
that I've never seen before. The performances are kind of universally brilliant, which is really surprising. I don't understand how they've managed that. Yeah. Obviously, having one of the major characters be Captain Janeway is pretty awesome as well. Yes. And they're not beyond going a bit fantastical quite a lot of the time, which I really like as well. I don't want something to be too straight-laced and reality-based. So I'm really glad you like it, because I can never tell whether you're going to be able to cope with certain aspects of the things that I like. And yeah, I am a big fan.
Yeah, my favourite gag in the show so far is it's a scene in a prison van where a prisoner is being driven back from having chemotherapy, and she's been told that she's going to die. It's a minor spoiler, but she is basically going to die for the entire show anyway. She's been told that she's going to die, and the guard that she's with starts this big monologue about, wow, it's so tough to get that news. It must be terrible to know you've only got this time left, and the worst thing about that is the thought of dying in prison. That's the worst thing I can imagine. And then he just turns on the radio and starts singing along to Breakfast at Tiffany's in a really high voice. And it's just like, that is absolutely, when the show is at its best, it deals with quite a big theme and it has a motive scene, and then it will just throw in a completely left field gag that makes no sense. And it feels realistic and funny at the same time. And that's a very high benchmark to hit. It doesn't always hit it, but very, very good writing there.
Yeah, I love the relationships between the inmates and the guards, and I think that is actually a thing that happens in low security prison. It's not just a completely lacking in relationship, that there is sometimes banter between those groups of people, and I think it's just amazing to look at something like prison, which is so completely different to anything you've ever been exposed to, and it's amazing to sort of just think about it.
Yeah, it is a good show. Right, that is the conclusion of today's show. Thank you very much for joining us. And you can follow us on Twitter. I'm Mode7Games. He's Ian Hardingham. Goodbye.
Yes, goodbye. Thank you for listening.
That's it, children. Time for bed. Don't forget to pay us a visit at www.visitingthevillage.com.